welcome back to Mages and Murderdads, the best show dedicated to the games beyond Baldur's Gate. This is episode 52, and we're playing Planescape Torment. In fact, we finished Planescape Torment. I'm Cameron, and I played the Nameless One.
And I am Danny, and I played the Nameless One.
Did you ever come to a conclusion about what your name is?
It's definitely Steve.
Steve, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We know a Steve.
We do know a Steve, but the thing is, I think that the Nameless One's identity, just the nature of it, maybe it's for the best that you're just called the Nameless One the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a mystery you don't plumb.
You don't need to plumb those depths, bro. Those depths alone. The classic Pink Floyd line. Hey, depth plumber, leave them depths alone.
Hey, dwarves, stop being so greedy.
Yeah, that was there. Unfortunate other concept album.
Don't you dig so deep?
Oh gosh, I'm sick. I don't feel good.
Yeah, so is that related to Planescape Torment?
Yeah, I asked myself, what can change the nature of a man?
Ravel then appeared and just like coughed directly into your nose as you were inhaling.
No, I think it was mostly I only ate potato chips and gave up vegetables because I thought, hey, nutrition can change the nature of a man. I'm going to become a Skeletor.
You know what's actually true? Kunzelman only eats potato chips. It is like a known. It's a known thing.
It's a known fact. That's all I eat. I had a potato for dinner. I had a whole potato.
That's good. Was it sweet potato?
Nope, normal.
I had a little housewarming party, and I got two pieces of bread and like 3 types of cheese. And put it on a cutting board.
If you're not supporting us on Patreon, this would be a great time to do that, because this is basically what our monthly podcast is. We're giving you a little bit of preview content of what that experience is like.
Yeah. But
maybe we'll save your exact charcuterie experience for the Patreon podcast.
I will, but I was only saying it because I was chopping up the cheese, and you know what came to my mind? What question?
What was that?
What can change the nature of a man?
What can change the nature of a man?
So what is the answer to that question?
Well, I have a question that begins before that question. Mm-hmm. It shows up in specific contexts, right?
Mm-hmm.
It shows up as a reflective question to the Nameless One.
Yeah.
Over and over again, it's asked, what can change the nature of a man? Meaning that, is there something essential inside of a person that makes them unchangeable?
Sure.
Right? Is there something there, or is there not? It shows up when Ravel asks it, and she doesn't care, right? It's not a real question to her, right? It's like a fake puzzle. And then it shows up with the Transcendent One as like no one can answer this, right? You know, this is kind of like an eternal question, and as such, it allows you to kind of get one over on him.
And it's interesting because as a question, it's both eternal, but it's also only really applicable to the Nameless One. Like, the Nameless One's the only reason why this kind of question has to exist, right? Because for everyone else, they've only got one life to live, right? So their true nature is, whether or not they can change or not, is kind of obscured by by their own mortality, right? By the fact that they're going to live one life, they're going to be presented with a certain context, with a certain time, and they're going to be reacting to that. So it's difficult. There's no like control to determine whether or not they have a nature. Whereas the Nameless One has lived so many times in this kind of eternal return, and has gone through the same motions of attempting to uncover his identity and you know, attempting to kind of like procure more power, etc. That becomes that's an actual live question, whether or not his nature can change, because he's gone through so many lifetimes, and it's always like come back to the same place. So there's kind of like that situation really creates an option where it is possible that you can't change. Am I completely off base here?
No, I think that's right. And like that's the weird thing about it is that the difference between someone, I think the way you set it up is right? There are people with mortality and people without mortality. And the Nameless One is theoretically the only person who is truly immortal in this, in the universe as it's set up.
Yeah, there are gods, but they're different. The question is specifically what can change the nature of a man, which implies mortality. It implies like a specific type of being. Whereas there are a lot of like deities that are just the embodiment of an idea, and of course that can't change. That's static.
Well, and if it goes away, they die. Right?
Yeah.
Like if no one does that anymore, or if like it's a portfolio, right? If this is kind of Forgotten Realmsy kind of stuff, that you can, if you're Kelemvor and you're divested of your portfolio, you stop being a god. Mm-hmm. Like you're not, you become a different thing then. I mean, but I guess I just wonder like. If for mortals in this universe, they're defined by their time and context, which I think is a really great way of putting it that you just said, then that happens to the Nameless One too. Because we get those 3 different versions of the Nameless One, or 4 if you count like us.
As I was giving that spiel, that moment in the little pocket plane prison came to me and I was like, oh shit. Is that not evidence already that there's been evidence for a long time, perhaps hundreds of years, that, yeah, the nature of a man can change because there's, like, good you?
Yeah. And so I guess I wonder, too, like, I take the question as a general, I think you take the question the same way. It's like a big general question. What can change the nature of a man? Meaning, can the nature, the essence of a being change? When maybe it's just like a practical question, what changes it?
Yeah, it could be, this question doesn't presuppose that it can in fact change. It's specifically, the operative word here is what. Like, yeah, what forces?
Yeah. Which would be the choices you make in the story, right?
The choices you make,
Like, if we're talking about, like, what's the difference between... evil you. I was trying to think of their actual names, but like paranoid you, right? And practical you. Mm-hmm. The difference between those 2 like versions of you in your head, of the Nameless One in your head, are about the choices they made during their lives, right?
I guess I think that a lot of like when you start taking this narrative very seriously, like we are in this discussion, I am brought back to last episode, like a central tension that we were finding in trying to like fully explicate the narrative of this game in terms of questions around timeline and like where did good you happen? Like, which is one of the reasons why the first time I encountered those people, I was like, good you might just like, these might be shards of a personality and not fully formed entities as they existed when they were alive. I don't know.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
Like, the timeline of when good you occurred, right? Mm-hmm. Like, did you make it to the negative material plane, right? Was there a good you that made it there?
No, I don't think so.
So we're saying the good you got zapped up into that pocket plane prison at some other time. Like, the Transcendent One was just, like, rolling around and, like, zapped him in there.
I mean, there's something interesting that's going on that, like, about the different ways that we can interpret that scene, but I don't think that's actually what's happening to me in that pocket plane is that there are instances of the Nameless One. If there have been, like, hundreds of lives, right? Mm-hmm. There are instances of those lives that got so far and were so powerful that they have been able to lodge themselves in your head somewhere. Because remember, when the good one is talking to you, he says...
that he is the reason why you have these weird flashbacks, right?
Yes, exactly. So he's, like, living in your head. So it's not that they're trapped in a pocket plane. It's that pocket plane, remember, was like a prism that we touched, or a crystal. Mm-hmm. And that just split us apart into different manifestations or whatever.
No, that's the thing. I think I buy that, but we also were talking about it and we were like, oh no, it was practical you that made it to the negative plane first. That is an entity that was living, at least that was how I was following our last conversation 2 weeks ago, right? That was, if there was you prime, which is the very first you, which might be good you, right? Because you're saying, oh, I was like a cartographer or something before. And then there's prime plus X, which is practical you, which is the first time you made it to the negative plane, and you made it with like Dakan and Dianara and like a couple other folks, right? And that was like a group that got split up. And then we know that and then we were also talking about how paranoid you were. You were like, no, you were the one responsible for like that tomb with the puzzle in it, right? The deadly puzzle and like and murdering. Like I thought it's complicated to me when you start looking those as people, because that's kind of how they were presented. But I think now that I'm talking, I think that I do appreciate the idea of like, these are just facets of your personality. I think I just talked myself in a circle. I don't know what narrative I'm sold on now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the one that I am talking through, I think is the one that the game leans hardest into, but also I don't think that it is like it's non-committal, right? Which is, I don't know, maybe to its benefit. There's maybe an ill-fitting canonicity to it.
You know what? I'd like that better than, let's say, it would have been somewhere in the clerk's ward that you just go into an inn, like you go into your room and you open up a chest and it's just a letter from Gorion being like, okay, you're the nameless one. Your name's actually Steve. And, you're, and this is everything that happens. This is the lore dump letter. Hope you open this chest, buddy.
Yeah, it's kind of like, was it in Baldur's Gate 1 or it was in Baldur's Gate 2 where we found out that we left Saravok?
That's Baldur's Gate 1.
Or was it Siege of Dragonspear though? I can't remember. No,
it's Baldur's Gate 1 when we return to Candlekeep. Remember?
Oh, okay.
And we like bust and we like get back into Candlekeep, and we can go to Gorion's room and open a chest, and it's like, you're a ball spawn.
Yeah. But I just couldn't remember, there's at some point in those two games we are given a story where we're told that like not only like that part of it, right? But I think it was in Siege of Dragonspear when we go to the Temple of Baal, because it's revealed that basically like Gorion stormed the keep, right? He like storms the temple and there are multiple children there and he rescues Gorion's ward.
Yeah, it would have been in the temple, and a priestess of some kind like spilled the beans about. Yeah, I
couldn't remember the exact. Yeah, I think that's right. She's like a blind priestess who's been there for a long time. Yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing that like shores up. I think that's the storytelling power difference of Baldur's Gate versus Planescape is like, I think that kind of thing is really fitting for Baldur's Gate. I like that in that story, that there's like a, I don't know, like a classic fantasy canon kind of thing going on. So like, this is what happened. It's a big clockwork universe, and here's all the true things that happened. It's very, capital L lore. I don't know if I have that same desire in Planescape Torment.
Yeah, I don't think it, but it is interesting, and I think that, we were talking earlier before we started recording, and I really like the opportunity to kind of like take a step back and talk about this game's story in context with the other games. There's an element of the way the story works in Baldur's Gate. You're talking about that traditional clockwork story where like you are this incredibly special individual, and like you are like the mega protagonist, right? But it's just so interesting because I think that in a lot of ways you are more important in the universe of Baldur's Gate, in the Baldur's Gate series, right? You are like one of many ball spawn that is going to end up being a god. You are integral into the political like climate of that region of the world for the entire time. And yet when you play Baldur's Gate, it doesn't feel like it. right? Like when you narratively, you'll talk to people, they have no idea who you are. Narratively, events will happen that are like you are responsible for them, but there's very few acknowledgments of that on a narrative level. Like you just kind of know it because you're going through it. It feels like Planescape is this weird inversion where like on one level you are very important, but on another level you're just kind of like one weird story in Sigil among a billion other weird stories. Go to the Flaming Corpse Bar, you'll hear like wild stories that are just as wild as yours in a lot of ways, right? Like it wouldn't be out of character to like go to the Flaming Corpse Bar and be like, yeah, I lost my immortality. That fits, right? But as opposed to Baldur's Gate, everything, like you like go to a building anywhere in Sigil and you like talk to enough people and one of your previous incarnations like pissed in the corner somewhere like a few years ago. Like it's all about you. Like there's so much reference to your character.
Yeah, there's something about how, I mean, it's the kind of narrative that we've talked about a bunch of times with Baldur's Gate, where it's like the dirt farmer narrative, right?
Yes.
Like you begin as a dirt farmer and you slowly work your way up the power ladder and you become important, you know, in the grand scheme of things. And
and the two kind of genres of RPGs is either you become important either like because you're predestined to, like there's something special about you from the beginning. You were a dirt farmer, but there was this hidden characteristic about you all along, like in Baldur's Gate. And there's like another genre of RPGs like, no, you actually are a dirt farmer. It was just like grit that got you to greatness.
Yeah,
right?
you're Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe like the weird feeling about the way that Planescape Torment is put together is it kind of is neither of those things. It's not you ascended to power as the chosen one, right? Which is the Baldur's Gate narrative. You got powerful and you're important in this world because you are the child of Baal. And it's not the Conan narrative at all, like even a little bit, right? It's you were important, you are important, you will be important. Like there's no point in the universe timeline in Planescape Torment where you are not the central focus of everything that is happening in this big clockwork thing. And that means that, like, I think that, you know, maybe narratively why we were so enthralled with Planescape Torment early, and then maybe less enthused about the narrative beats later, at least I was less enthused with the narrative beats that were happening later, is because of it's almost like a fatigue, like a specialness fatigue.
Yeah.
Because it's not linear, right? It's that every place, like you're saying, like every hovel you go to, you were here before and you were very important then, and you're very important now, and the next time you show up, you're going to be very important.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we live in a culture that is obsessed with the origin story, right? Like we have to, every third superhero movie, we've got to reset it because we need to get that origin story again. And I don't know if it's out of a fixation to get it right, or there's also like commercial, like you got to reprime the audience, etc. Right? But the origin story is if you were tasked with like doing a film on Planescape, there's no origin story. That is not the one you do, right? It is a narrative arc of this game is in media res. Like that's the only way to begin because it's a story about this eternal return, and you just have to like start whenever, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're totally right. That's probably one of the reasons why we were so psyched about this when it began, because it was a real departure from, you know, God, how many episodes, like 40 something episodes of us, you know, talking about a story that like works a certain way. And this works a very different way, and it'll be interesting. Like as we move on to other games, like to the next Planescape game, which from what I understand, is a little bit different. You've played it, I have not.
Yeah.
And these other games like Pillars of Eternity, which I think you played the second one for review. Like how those things work moving forward.
Yeah. They both. I can just kind of briefly say without any kind of spoiler. Torment Tides of Numenera, which is kind of like the spiritual sequel to this game, knows exactly that this is a problem and solves it in an interesting way. Like it seems to begin with the position of, well, I don't want to say any more than that, I guess, but
okay.
it knows that this can be a narrative problem, and so chooses to solve it in a really interesting way. And Pillars of Eternity is just straight up dirt farmer story.
Yeah, no, that's true. And the same thing with Icewind Dale, right? You create that party wholesale. Like you can, there's nothing pre-made about it, right? So
I don't have it with me anymore. Did I tell you about the timeline I found? I think I did.
Oh, you told me about it, but I don't think you elaborated.
Yeah, maybe I didn't say it in the episode. Anyway, I found an interesting timeline that someone on like the Beamdog forums had put together at some point, and it's like a timeline of all of these video games, and it basically says that Planescape Torment ends the year that Baldur's Gate 1 begins, I believe.
Interesting. And I wonder if that's an extrapolation out of things like the events of the Blood War.
So yeah, it is. It's an extrapolation of that out of the boss or the like big bad of Icewind Dale, which hooks back into Baldur's Gate 2, I want to say. I don't remember the exact circuit, but yeah, basically there are like shared characters and objects throughout the games. And so, for example, I know in Baldur's Gate 2, you can buy the Black Blade of Zerthon or whatever, Dakon's weapon. Yeah. You can buy that in the Adventurer's Mart. So, right, that implies that there's some timeline changiness.
Interesting. No, so this kind of, an earlier comment you said about kind of maybe less enthused at the end. Was it the story you were less enthused by at the end, or did the gameplay like shade your perception in one way or another?
I've been thinking about that the past couple weeks or so, the past week since we recorded. Especially, and I'll talk about it in a minute, but I started reading the Planescape Torment novelization. And I was thinking about like kind of like, what part of this is so I don't know, like compelling to me, right? And I don't know if it's like the basic plot.
Yeah.
Because the basic plot is not particularly interesting. It's that I think, upon reflection, that it's a game that seems very committed to filling out its world with interesting people. And what the game seems to kind of believe on the whole is that those people are interesting because they have zany stories that ultimately tie in with yours. And what I found so cool about like going around the Hive in those first couple episodes and doing all the stuff at the Burning Wizard Inn, whatever it was called.
Smoldering Corpse Bar.
Smoldering Corpse Bar. I got every word wrong. The Smoldering Corpse Bar, what's cool about that is like all those people do have these really robust and big stories that's just not going to appear in the Baldur's Gate games for whatever reason. And so, yeah, I don't know if I find the plot events of like, and then you go here and you pick up this thing, and you go talk to this guy, and then you go do the other thing, and then you go here and then you find Ravel. I don't know if that's interesting. They did a very good job of setting up Sigil as a place that matters and has weight and has this kind of like very material feel to it. I remember in an earlier episode we talked for a long time about like, the social strata of Sigil and how that works.
Yeah.
And that all falls away at the end, right?
It does. Once we leave, probably once we leave Sigil, a lot of, because we're just like kind of stopping through, we're on a little grand tour of the multiverse there.
Yeah.
And we're not able to go deep on any of those places. I bet that the ethos of this game, if it were carried to like the Grey Wastes, and we just spent 5 hours of gameplay like in the Grey Wastes exploring like a part of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you followed the ethos of this game, I think that it would work. It would work in that same way. And I think I agree with you. There was something really refreshing about a game that was willing to set up a universe and set up, like, just some assumptions about the way this place worked. And it just followed through with every single one of them.
Yeah.
There's this science fiction. I remember, like, you commented about a science fiction film recently, and I don't know if it was like the Wachowski film. I think it might have been Valerian, but it was basically, you said, the reason why I love that film is because it sets up some premises, and it just fully embraces like that and like takes them to their logical endpoint. Which one was that?
Well, that could be either Valerian or Jupiter Ascending. Those are both movies that I think were given short shrift because they don't adhere to like quote unquote good filmmaking principles. Like I'm willing to grant that, but I think that they set up the balls rolling and then just follow them in places that like kind of suck sometimes. Like it really drags the movie down, both of those movies down. but I admire the I don't know, the impetus or the ethic in it.
I feel the same way about Sigil.
Yeah,
there's just something fascinating where I feel like in Baldur's Gate, when you actually get to Baldur's Gate, or you can go to any other city there, I guess, or in Om, it doesn't feel as real because you're gonna like find there are zany stories, certainly. They're fewer and far between in those games, but they don't feel enmeshed in that place. Which is wild that Planescape can do it because Sigil is this mishmash of places, right? But it feels like, for whatever reason, Sigil, this strange, ever-churning place that just exists at the whim of the Lady of Pain, feels more real to me than Baldur's Gate did.
Yeah. And, I think I was just looking here while you were talking about... that they're like, I knew that the development time was pretty short, but it comes out December 12th, 1999, and the pitch document was produced in 1997. So it's less than 2 full years of development on this game. And for some reason, I don't, the Wikipedia page is pretty dense, so I'm not looking at it right here, but for whatever reason, I believe that it was like an 18-month development period of actual development. And like when you're talking about, comparing this to Om or whatever, I mean, I think that the best version of Planescape is a city that's the same size as Athkatla, but just 3 times as dense.
Yeah.
And like that's the Planescape game. And I think they're, it's to their detriment that they have to kind of do the tour of the multiverse kind of thing. Because I think that you could probably do all the things that are interesting in this game in a much more limited capacity. Because it doesn't seem like, I love the Baldur's Gate games, but it doesn't seem like those games are ever really interested in depth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, 2 is the biggest example of that, right? Like 2 is, we're going to give you this gargantuan map, right? And the game is to a certain extent going to take you all around it. But
yeah.
No, I agree. There's a version of Planescape where it just stayed in Sigil, right? And arguably a lot of that time. But to me, the fact that the story does get a little like kind of just fetch questy there at the end with the tour of the multiverse, that was rough. I do think that switch also coincided with like the mandatory fighting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the least engaging like combat type gameplay that I've played in a very long time. Like which is unfortunate. That being said, it's a game of its time. It definitely bears those marks. But Baldur's Gate came first. No? Baldur's Gate came first.
Yeah. Well, it's different teams.
It's
right?
different teams, yeah.
Like, so Baldur's Gate is BioWare, and then Black Isle is Planescape.
Yeah.
So.
Just not as compelling for whatever reason. Didn't have the kind of stickiness, or you couldn't really grok it in the way that you could Baldur's Gate.
What do you mean?
It may well be because of my like familiarity with Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that Baldur's Gate 1 hews a little closer to that tradition in terms of the way that the combat works. Planescape just felt like a bumbly mess in terms of like the output numbers of things like damage and how much damage you take, and all of those things, right? That's how it felt for me. It felt very ephemeral and just kind of like out there. But it may be because I wasn't playing optimally. I know you weren't.
Yeah, I was playing very suboptimally. Yeah, I think so. I think that for whatever reason, I mean, yeah, I don't know. It could just be like partially the clarity of the inventory screen, like on a basic UI UX kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because like I knew when numbers were going up, but without like a super robust arms and armor system of like really switching around like 5 different iterations of different arms and armor, it's kind of hard to get a sense of like what's good and what's bad. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Baldur's Gate, you can like, very early, you're going to get 5 different versions of armor, and you're going to be able to determine, this like, I can't, like that basic leather armor is less good than chain armor.
Yeah.
And like I can tell that because I can equip them both and I can see my THAC0. But then again, as soon as I say that, I think, oh yeah, but then you have to know that like your THAC0 number going down to -1 is good.
No, all of that true. That being said, I do think Baldur's Gate is doing, inadvertently or not, a better job of teaching you the system because, like you said, within the first like hour of Baldur's Gate, you do pick up 4 types of armor, and I know that there are tons of stories about people playing Baldur's Gate and being like, yeah, I didn't know that negative armor was good until I beat the game or what have you. But the big, obviously heavy armor does make your armor go down.
Yeah, I mean, that could be part of it too, right? Is that I think there's a basic RPG literacy to leather armor, chain armor, plate armor, somewhere in that. And
whereas the first like 10 items you pick up in this game are like dead flies and shit.
A rat's charm.
A rat tail. Here's a dead fly. Here's like an embalming fluid, which is the most... Embalming fluid was the least, roundabout weird thing that you picked up in this game. You're like, okay, I could see how this could be a health potion, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, maybe that's the cost you pay when you are... narratively, gameplay-wise, all those different things when you're breaking boundaries. And like, whatever our opinion is, like, it's worked out. This game is still recognized as, if not the best video game story of all time, then a top 5 by basically everyone. This still holds up even today.
Yeah. What does that say?
I've never really thought that was true. Like, I played this game in 2011, 2012. I know at some point I went back and looked, but whenever I played this game for the first time all the way through I kind of balked at everyone who had said that. And then I thought, maybe that's because I grew up getting to play kind of the next generation of games after this. So Knights of the Old Republic or Morrowind, right? Like the kind of games that came directly after this, Mass Effect, and I'm saying games from the same studio or the same people, but these are lessons learned on the stepladder that is Planescape Torment. And even in brackets, I mean, maybe it was great in comparison to everything else that existed at the time, but people still hold this up to super, super high regard. And I think it's a good game, and I think it's a great story, but I don't think it's cracking my top 10.
Really?
I don't know. I think that I rate Baldur's Gate 2 over this one.
Yeah. That's a hard question for me because when I don't know. When I think of, because I think we've talked about the way in which we evaluate things, and I think that my scores tend to err on the side of just giving credit to games that can give me high highs, and I'll oftentimes overlook low lows. Mm-hmm. So for a narrative experience, I just like the high highs for like the surprise and delight that I felt in some things, sometimes not even related to the main story. Sometimes it was just like, I can go to a lecture hall and just listen to a dwarf talk about the Blood War and just walk out of the lecture anytime I want, but it'll just keep going. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is fun. Like, this is so cool. I don't know if I'm measuring it in terms of like I have had like a transformative narrative experience. Like, this is a story that has been told, and I'm gonna like think about it. I don't know if I'm evaluating it on that level, but I thought it was fun and cool. And I haven't had many experiences like it. Like, I'm thinking about some things in Morrowind, but Morrowind just like a lot of like the weird story beats didn't stick with me as strongly as it.
Yeah,
so this
yeah,
game.
and maybe what I'm thinking about it, like in those terms, yes. Like I think that the highs of this game, maybe this is it, right? That if we imagine this game as a waveform of experience, right? Then the peaks are dope.
Yeah,
they might be higher than many other games I've played.
Mm-hmm.
The lows are much lower.
Yeah.
Much lower than many other games I've played.
But the narrative lows are just game overall lows.
I don't know.
Because the narrative low in this game doesn't seem that low to me. It's just, okay, it's a fetch quest. I have to like go to the next place. Which
yeah.
That's not that bad in terms of games. Like that's a lot of games. That's just all it is, right?
Yeah, but that's not going to make those games are not going to make my top 10 anyway, right?
That's true. That's true.
I mean, I just think about the narrative games I really enjoy, which are like a game that I really like. I really like Final Fantasy VIII. It's a game that people have strong opinions of, positive and negative. I think its highs are very high. I think its lows are very middling. Like they're just fine. Or like Final Fantasy IX. Conveniently right after Final Fantasy VIII, where I think that there aren't very many lows in that game. It's just like peaks and then like mostly good stuff. You know,
so it's like peaks and
arcs.
so excellent to above average.
Yeah, like I think that's a game that carries itself all the way through in a really strong way, and that's like contemporary to that. Although it's in a different kind of genre of RPG and definitely coming from a different cultural context and all kinds of things like that. Mm-hmm. So maybe even the comparative isn't fair, but I just think like. Another way of doing it, maybe this is another way of kind of reframing this conversation. Mm-hmm. I think I don't want anyone else to make a game like this.
One and done. We did it.
Like, yeah, and you'll see when we get to Torment Tides of Numenera, the ways that that game tries to remake parts of this game, and I think those are very not strong, and where it does other things are very, very strong. Like I think this is a great, I like a good like modernist experimental novel, but I don't want to read any of the other people who are trying to replicate that. And I think there's a lot of replication of this, the kind of profundity of this game.
Well, I mean, in this series, in Mages and Murderdads, we're now at the stage, right? Because this show is a show about Baldur's Gate and its spiritual successors, right?
Yes.
We have played Baldur's Gate, and we have played Baldur's Gate 2. We also played this, like, nostalgia-wrapped kind of story that fills the gap between those two in Siege of Dragonspear.
A spiritual midquill.
Yeah, a spiritual midquill.
A little bit of news. Our good friend Phil Daigle from Beamdog Softworks or whatever, Beamdog Entertainment, no longer works there anymore.
Whoa.
I believe, I'm not 100%, you should go check his Twitter, but I believe he has gone indie to make what, this is just the game that he's appeared to be working on for a while, kind of independently, but he's making a Baldur's Gate roguelike.
Interesting. It's not like the bullet hell that we pitched him when he came on the show.
It's not. I mean, I think he probably sold that to Beamdog as he left the building. He said, hey now. But yeah, it looks like he's making like a party-based RPG tactical roguelike.
Fun.
It does seem pretty cool.
But I guess what I was saying is, like, we've now played the games upon which every other game we're going to play in this series is built, right?
Yeah, yes.
Like, everything after this point is just, like, trying to... this may be too critical. Like, feel free to correct and moderate this statement that I'm about to make. Everything beyond this point is just, like, nostalgia.
I don't think that's wrong. I mean, I think that there are other pieces of the puzzle that we don't have that are important, and maybe we go back at some point and fill those in. I think people really want us to play Icewind Dale,
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I'm not itching to play that game.
I think that the idea is if you play Icewind Dale, there's very, very little story in Icewind Dale. Icewind Dale is like a couple episodes, maybe a few episodes, right? But yeah. Also, I think a lot of people have like thrown in Fallout as like a...
Yeah, that's what the other thing I was going to mention. Just because the team that worked on Planescape Torment did Fallout 2. I mean, it's the same team for the most part. And so Fallout and Fallout 2 are kind of big pieces of this puzzle, and then kind of some other additional stuff that's like of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. I can't remember the before the colon title for that game, but Arcanum maybe.
Yeah, Arcanum, I think, something like that.
And then there is like Jagged Alliance. Those games, I think, kind of intersect. I mean, they're very different, but they're, kind of tactical, team-based narrative or party narrative kind of games.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Nobody's making rehashes of those games. Those games led up to, like, the Baldur's Gate.
So that's what I'm saying, right? Like, all of this is part of, like, a big amalgamated picture of the late 1990s and early 2000s, of which there's like two offshoot branches, right?
Yeah.
One is Neverwinter Nights, which I don't think is in our immediate future, just because it is kind of the transformative moment between these games and then Knights of the Old Republic,
Dragon
Mass
Age.
Effect. Yeah, exactly. All those kinds of games. So that's like one branch, and then the other one is the one you're talking about, the kind of nostalgia dotted line that shoots forward 15 years
where they just they're making Pillars of Eternity, where they're just making Baldur's Gate again with like very relatively small, like if your grandpa saw you playing both games, it's identical. Maybe grandpa's like, I guess if you're playing Pong or like Formula 1, it's the same thing, but very, very similar games. Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. And so I guess that's the question is like, how much of the cluster of the late 90s do we feel like we need to have mastery of before we can confidently point backward? And I've played Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 a number of times, so I feel pretty good about those. But maybe at some point it's worth going back at least to those two.
Yeah, maybe it's one of those things where we play things after that dotted line, and then maybe after a couple games we like take a step back and play one of the older games, and just like as a kind of a refresh on our perspective.
Yeah, because I think that the kind of list of things I think we probably need to touch of most recent games are Pillars of Eternity 1, Pillars of Eternity 2, Torment, Tides of Numenera, and Tyranny. Those are like the four. All of which have team members from these previous games that we've been playing. They are all directly sold themselves as spiritual sequels to those games. And then somewhere in that mix, I think going back to Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. But also, I mean, I think that... How long did it take us to do Baldur's Gate 2? A year?
Yeah, God, it was a lot of episodes. It's the majority. Like, we're on episode 53 right now. Over half of those episodes are Baldur's Gate 2.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take that long or longer to do Pillars of Eternity 2. I feel confident.
Did you beat that game?
Yeah, I did. I did not do even close to all the side content in my initial playthrough, though. So, because there's just a lot,
Yeah, I think did you ever get an idea from like any of the press materials, like how big PoE 2 was compared to PoE 1?
I think they're about the same size. I'm not
about the same size. I remembered PoE 1 being pretty big.
Yeah, they definitely like oversold themselves on accident for that. I mean, they talk about that pretty explicitly about what they pitched for that game and what they could do and how much they overpitched on what they could do. But they delivered, so I think it worked out for them.
Well, before we end time here, you read the novelization of Planescape Torment, or most of it?
Well, I read some of it. I read half of it. I tried to read
you
all
read
of it.
half of it and then the last page, so that's 51%. That's most.
You're right. Yeah, I read... It is... maybe I read a little bit less than half. I read... It's 247 pages, and I read like 100 of those. So yeah, a little bit less than half. I would not recommend this book.
Who is the author of this book?
Written by Ray and Valerie Valisi. I don't know how you say their last name. Vallese. And it's not that I wouldn't recommend this book because it's bad. It's just like a normal fantasy novel, and you could just play the video game. You know what I mean? It's not special in any way, I don't think.
So I think the fan community is not a fan of that.
Yes, that's what I've heard.
But you know what they are a fan of?
Yeah. So I have the official novelization.
Correct. So
Paperback book.
yeah, it's got
TSR
an ISBN
published.
number.
It does. It has a whole ISBN number. It has TSR's logo on the side. Everything.
So yeah, someone out there. So basically, this person, Riss Hess. There's this website that if you like Planescape Torment novel, and like one of the top 5 is this very sketchy looking URL. It looks like it's from the 90s, which I'm sure it is. It's a PDF. And there's a Word document, and you open it up, and like the pages are out of order. And like at first I was like, what is going on? No, it's meant to be bound. Like you're meant to print it out and like bind it as a book. But this person went through the game and just transcribed all of the dialogue and novelized the player's actions in between the dialogue.
Great.
I'll give me just a, do your best. I want you to guess, how many pages do you think is in this?
700.
Yeah, I'm looking, and this bad boy, let me see what the page numbers at the bottom here say. It is like 450 pages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's 450 pages of just the game. And I did not read that, but I did scan through it as well as I could. And two different mediums apparently. I think novel writing and video games. I don't think that they necessarily. I don't think you can like directly translate one into the other.
No. So let me give you. I marked some pages to read to you and the noble listeners, the viewer listener at home. This is Mort speaking.
Okay.
So we wake up in the mortuary. Rather than doing any quests in the mortuary, we just run out into the street. This is page 12. We are out of the mortuary. Okay? Importantly, the first 60 pages or so of this, 50 pages maybe, are written in second person because the nameless one is just referred to as he.
Oh, okay.
Kind of an interesting thing. Not fun to read necessarily, but like I respect the formal choice. This is Mort talking. New to Sigil, are you? Asked the skull, noting his confusion. His confusion being the nameless one, by the way. Noting his confusion, they don't call this burg the City of Doors for nothing. It's lousy with portals that lead all over the sodding universe. Doors, windows, sewers, closets, just about anything that makes a hole can be a portal. They don't open without the right keys, though, so I doubt you've got to fret about getting whisked away to somewhere else when you least expect it. But like you just saw, planeswalkers coming from somewhere else might pop in anywhere. So look alive if you want to stay that way. Planeswalkers.
Garruk.
He's coming.
Liliana.
But that's the kind of like writing this is. There's a lot of just like exposition of like, this is Sigil. This is what you're seeing. This is what you're looking at.
This dives a bit. I've just opened to I've got a little page I marked here in the chapter Pillar of Skulls. Okay. Mort stared at my feet. I'd never seen him look so miserable. Those moments Look, Chief, I don't even remember being human. I don't remember what life was like before the pillar. Dakon, staring into the distance, spoke quietly. It's like cupping water in one's hands. Mort glanced at Dakon, then me. Yeah, I guess, and that's pretty much the way things are when you die. You forget. I figure I wasn't a sterling member of the community when I was alive. But hells, who is? Mort sighed again. It's just that I can't help it. Nothing's worse than being honest all the time. But look, Chief, if that pile of heads sees me, it'll want me back. Bad. You can't let that happen. So it's literally, does this ring a bell to you?
Yeah, it's the exact dialogue from the game.
Exact dialogue from the game. Someone went and it's all there. It's just all there verbatim. With like, it's like 90% of the book's dialogue. There's just a few like paragraphs here and there about like how do you get from one point of the dialogue to the next. Yeah, it doesn't work in novel form. I'm going to make a strong statement that way. I don't think that the beam should not be crossed.
So here's the same part of the game, but rewritten in the book.
Okay.
This is the beginning of chapter 13. Well, there's the dark of it, Mort said resignedly, hovering near the Tower of Murmuring Heads. You've been rubbing shoulders with the only blood ever to give the laugh to the Pillar of Skulls. I got here when I fell into the dead book because, well, I was a right bastard. I made the top shelf seer, but once I had a gullish jink, I just predicted what I knew he wanted to hear. Burks like that end up here in the Pillar, damned to rattle off true answers to questions till their jaws rot off. Thane recalled how... So, the Nameless One names himself Thane like 50 pages into this book. And that's just your name.
Okay.
Yeah. Thane recalled how Mort had said he'd never be a slave again. His mind raced back over everything Mort had told him since they'd met. He couldn't think of a single bit of advice that had been a lie. It appeared that Thane wasn't the only one who'd been a different person in a past life.
Oh, so, that's interesting. There's so much more. Like... I think I would enjoy reading that novelization more.
Yeah, it's not. Like I said, it's not a bad novelization. It's just like a normal fantasy book. You know what I mean? Like, not. I don't think it. Once you've played the game, a lot of it's like repeat information, and the things that's not repeat information is just kind of artfully told characterization. All of which is fine. Like there's way worse ways to write a book. So
yeah.
But
overall rating, like, are you happy that we played Planescape?
Yeah.
No, I think I agree with you. It was overall like a fun and edifying experience for me. Damn, the whole series messed up by leaving out Final Fantasy animations for like big spells.
I know, really. I mean, that's like. FYI, if you're making a spiritual successor to these games...
Why are you not including this? This is a formal part of this game's history.
Yeah. I don't think that... like, as frustrated as I find the play of this game sometimes, like, I'm not mad to play it. I'm not itching to play it again, for the next 7 years or so.
You know what's wild?
I'll give it a good decade.
We finished Baldur's Gate, and I was like, yeah, I think we're done. I think I'm done with ever playing this. I think that, like, those patch notes from Beamdog actually is making me think about, like, making a paladin or something in Baldur's Gate and just, like, doing a very, like, vanilla good party run through that game or something.
You're cursing yourself.
I know. Oh, no, but then I'd have to do an evil run through so I can finish Kagane's quest.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, the 2.5 patch came out for all of the Beamdog games, and it's like a massive, massive patch.
Yeah.
That, like, fixes a million things, like, adds, because, who imprisoned Branwen?
Oh,
Do you remember? Anyway, the wizard that imprisoned Branwen is, like, in... the game. He's the guy you meet in Baragost, like the contact you meet, and she never normally in the game would never speak to him, but now she has like a line she says to acknowledge.
The biggest thing is Kagane's quest. Like, this is a dwarf who in all of Baldur's Gate history has his quest has been glitched from the jump. It's never been finished.
It's just incomplete. It's uncompletable.
Yeah. So that's wild that they added that. I know that the enhanced edition like nodded to the fact that it was glitched. Like, you would get to the point where it would normally continue and he'd be like, never mind. It's cool. So it was an acknowledgement that it was glitched, but I'm interested. I wonder if they just like made that up whole cloth or if there was some like notes to go by of like what the intended conclusion of the quest was going to be.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's like in a. I would be surprised if it weren't like code complete and just it didn't like assets
there was
weren't
like
there
a
or
trigger.
Something. Yeah, Like a flag maybe was missing or something. Mm-hmm. But, well, if it had been that easy, they might have done it before. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Someone let us know.
It's a question. Hopefully, God, I don't know. But we've got a new game. Maybe I can't go back and just play Baldur's Gate for the hell of it, because I think we got a new game we're going to be playing.
We do. We're going to be playing Torment, Tides of Numenera. Big
modern game. The most recent game we've played yet.
Yes, true.
We did the math.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, it's about the same length as Planescape Torment, so it's probably the same, 8, 9 episodes, something like that. I think it'll be a good time. We'll have an easy time of it. I don't think it'll be that stressful.
I remember from when you reviewed it, you were like, yeah, if you don't want to fight in this game, you never have to.
Yeah, I think I played that game and gotten like 2 fights the whole time.
Yeah. It's going to be wild. We will do a better job of coordinating before we start to make sure we have very divergent playstyle experiences.
Yeah, and since I have played it before and recently, I kind of have a memory of playing the big charisma, big wisdom one. Mm-hmm. Although that's not really what it is. Basically, you have these tides, these different like stat point allotments, and you can use them in events. And they're like different things. So it's like there's red ones and there's purple ones and there's blue ones, and there's some decisions that you can make that cost like X number of red ones.
Oh wow! So this is kind of a meta currency.
Yeah. It's like an event skill points currency kind of thing.
I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a fresh breath of fresh air for sure.
Yeah, it is definitely a systemic difference. This is not a Infinity Engine-like game or D&D-like system, which is pretty cool. It's a different kind of thing.
But you can tune in for that in a couple weeks.
In a couple weeks, yeah. It'll be coming out probably 2 weeks from whenever this comes out. We might take a longer break. I don't know, but
it might be possible.
Soon.
We'll see how it all shakes out. But any other final announcements before we close it out?
No. Check out our Patreon. That's in the link down below. You can come and support us if you like the show. If you want us to keep making these and getting through all kinds of new games, make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And please tell your friends or people you like or people you don't like about it. We would love for you to do that. You can, if you're watching this on YouTube or any of the platforms, just be aware that in the description down below that you can go subscribe to it on the Google Play Store or whatever that is, and you can also find it on iTunes, and you can also just go manually listen to it at rangetouch.com if you go find the show that is titled Mages and Murderdads.
And you've got a really big popular show on the Range Touch website too that isn't this show.
Yeah, the Range Touch Network also supports a show called Game Study Study Buddies, which is a show I do with Michael Lutz, where we read a game studies book and then talk about it. The most recent one was a 3-hour marathon session.
So I did the math, and I think that if because there was there's an hour and 24-minute one, and then there's a hour and 50-minute one, and then there's a 3-hour and 20-minute one. I think the next one, given the math, is going to be 9 hours.
Yeah,
extrapolated.
Every time that Michael and I record a show, we say, all right, we got to make this one a little bit shorter. and it almost doubles in length every time. So this next one will be shorter. We're not gonna do the big robust thing.
That being said, don't be turned off by the length of any of those, because it's 100% the kind of show where if you don't have the time to listen to it in one go, you can pause it, and it's very easy, or at least it was for me to pick up the next time I wanted to listen.
And look, if you want to know about game studies books, you just got to be in it. You got to be ready for that 3 hours.
No, are you a committed gamer?
Yeah. Are you what? Game knowledge thinker?
Yeah.
You got to put that in little tiny letters.
Or are you like some casual that can't spend 3 hours listening to an academic discussion about game studies? If not, maybe it's time to turn in your gamer badge.
Uh-oh. But so we have that, and you can support that on Patreon as well. Currently, our rewards are for $1 a month. You can get our newsletter. For $3 a month, you can get the notes that Michael and I make for our other show, and for $5 a month, you can listen to our monthly podcast, which Danny and I are about to record right now.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about some charcuteries.
Yeah, so if you got that little charcuterie talk earlier, and you were like, "Damn, I want to know about them charcuteries," we're gonna learn about them in the next one. Anyway, but yeah, so next episode's going to be Torment, Tides of Numenera. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, ciao.